the pilot of the future, the sixth generation fighters, for example, is not going to be some dogfighter like you see in Star Wars. No, he's going to be a mission commander who's not even going to be flying his own plane exactly. I mean, the AI will deal that while he's dealing with go there, do this, do that. And the other assets will only do it, but they'll figure out how to do it, and they'll coordinate with one another so they do it.
From Earhart Innovation Series, this is What Follows with Nate Thuli.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to What Follows, the podcast where we explore the people shaping aviation today and the ideas defining what comes next. I'm your host, Nate Thuli. I'm pleased to have our guest on the show today, someone who's worn a lot of fascinating hats. He's been a playwright, an author, a field archaeologist, a university lecturer, and now serves as a leading voice in science and technology journalism for New Atlas, one of the world's most influential platforms covering breakthrough innovation and reaching millions of readers globally. His name is David Szondy. David has an extraordinary ability to connect the past, present, and future, from excavating ancient history to decoding some of the most advanced aerospace, defense, and space technologies shaping today. In our conversation, we explore the paths of storytelling and how innovation imperatives kind of drive what comes next, and very well aligned with our What Follows theme. We're excited to jump in. All right, David, welcome to the show.
Thank you. We're glad to be here.
Yeah, thanks for being on. So I would love to talk about New Atlas, but before we do, I want to start with you. You've had a very unique path, looking first back into the past with your background in archaeology and academia, and then writing now not only in the present but future, in the kind of this cutting edge space where aerospace and tech come together. Could you walk us through that a little bit?
Well, that's a good question. I'll give you the short answer, otherwise we'll be here for about 10 years. In many ways, of course, it seems like I'm just very disjointed, but there's actually a strong through line with it. For example, I've never had a proper job in my entire life. Everything I've been is freelancing in contracts. So I've never been actually part of an institution as such, as an official of it, which gives me a lot of freedom to choose my own path professionally. And also, I have been a writer since I was 18 years old, and it's always been there. But when you get to be my age, you have things fade in and out of focus over the years. So you're doing more of one thing and less of another. Mm-hmm. And also, doing the archaeology is interesting. You think, well, you're just dealing with the dead past. But in fact, you're using innovation to learn more about the past. And when I was doing archaeology, I was a field archaeologist and then also university lecturer in the field. But my thing was we were working with lots of innovations in the field, finding new ways of gathering information, new ways of doing so accurately and precisely and non-destructively if possible. So we came up with all kinds of new techniques. As a matter of fact, if you've ever seen a lot of these CSI series, all this very intricate way that they use of gathering evidence, those are all based upon techniques that we developed back in the 70s and 80s. Yeah.
Really? Okay.
And that was one of the things that I was involved in at one point, which was helping to move these techniques into forensics. So, right. And then I went in and ended up teaching for a while. Well, actually, I taught on and off a couple of times. And then after that, I decided, I was looking at the stuff I was doing and I realized, I'm never going to end up, excavating Maidenhead Castle or finding a tomb of a pharaoh someplace. So let's go and do something a bit more interesting.
Sure.
And so actually I turned to something else I'd been working in, which was theater.
Okay.
And so I got into that because I had a girlfriend at one point who was a lighting designer. And if you date a lighting designer, you're going to be carrying lights, and then you're going to be standing in at rehearsal. The next thing you know, you're on stage wondering how the hell I got here.
And now you're the stand-in on every tech week, and then next thing you're taping down spots on the stage.
You taped out spots on the stage. Next thing you know, you're in the play itself, and you have no idea how the hell you became an actor. But from that, it was good because I learned a great deal, which I used for my writing. I learned enough about stagecraft to become a playwright. And I wrote a number of plays, some which were lucky enough to win awards. And that was rather nice to have happen.
Yeah.
And then after I got married, I decided I had to do something a little bit more stable. And so I started focusing more on stuff that actually paid money to a certain extent. So I started working a lot for doing a lot of commercial writing. I did editing for companies like Boeing and Microsoft. Microsoft got their hands on an encyclopedia, and somebody said, you need an editor. You can't just buy the encyclopedia and pop it on a CD-ROM.
Mm-hmm. Oh my
So
gosh, I remember I remember those CD-ROM encyclopedias.
that's right. Yeah, they bought a whole encyclopedia called the Encyclopedia Africana.
Okay.
And so I was one of the people who was there, editing this thing to make it useful for publication. And it was kind of intimidating because I had to call up world-renowned scholars and tell them, your article on Ethiopia is kind of rubbish.
Interesting. Oh my gosh, interesting.
So, you get that going on. And then eventually I ended up becoming a contributor for New Atlas. Sort of it was one of many things that was going on because this was a time when everything was in flux, in the whole online world. I got into this and I got very interested in it. And they were very receptive to my stuff. And it was one where I could just keep contributing to it. At that time, I wasn't restricted by a budget. So I could just give them everything I had, and they'd be quite happy with it. So since then, since 2011, I've been a contributing feature writer to them, and also because I've been working with it so much, I'm also not just a contributor, but I also work. Oh, hang on. I also see more of the back end stuff these days.
Okay.
So I know more about how it's running, where it's going, and so forth. It's really a fascinating publication.
Yeah.
I mean,
yeah, absolutely.
It started out as one that dealt mostly with just things like gadgets.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
it even went by a different name.
It was Gizmag at one time, and as a matter of fact, they're actually thinking about reviving that because one of the things that's happening is we are chasing these Google algorithms all the time, and we're going up, and they don't understand. We've got this incredible array of topics. I mean, it's just astonishing. If you go read it, you'll always find something interesting to read. Trouble is, the Google algorithm doesn't understand it.
Interesting.
And so
So
we're
it's scrubbing
evolving
it, but there's no context.
Yeah, exactly. So what they're doing is they are experimenting with a new format where they're breaking off a lot of stuff that we have into other channels, you might say, that are more focused. And so that way, it not only helps with the algorithm, but also makes our readers a little bit less confused.
So as we're talking about, the different topics that people are reading about and the threads that they're trying to pull together, one thing that we've been looking at Earhart is sort of an education imperative that goes on to being a first mover in something.
Mm-hmm.
And it's often referred to as a first mover disadvantage, right? Because it's kind of like, hey, when you're pushing something new into the world, often there's if you're the one that then has to educate, there's this extra burden you have to do of like, hey, here's all the reasons why this is the right way. We have to build the context. We have to build that around there, either within your time and the archaeology scene and the new innovative methods you're talking about there, or really throughout now writing about this. Have you seen the same type of a thing?
It's very standard. Some of the most unlucky things you can be is to be the first one in the field. I mean, yeah, and you often end up doing a lot of the busy work, and then somebody takes all the credit for what you've done because they figured out. I mean, it's like the old thing they point out about, did Thomas Edison invent the incandescent light bulb? And well, if you're in America, they say yes, and if you're in England, we say no, because it was a man named Swan who invented it. In fact, in England, it's legally called the Swan-Edison bulb because of a lawsuit that was brought. Yeah, Swan had produced a perfectly functioning incandescent bulb, which was almost identical in many ways to Edison's first bulb. But Edison came along and he came up with a whole system for using it.
Yeah, the history books we studied in elementary school didn't have that in there, weirdly enough, right?
Exactly. As the same thing with so many things. I mean, where if you're the first one that comes out with it, I mean, well, even the high-tech stuff we have today, all of our stuff, all of our tablets, for example, are based on the iPad. Right. But there were way others before that.
Yeah.
Yeah. And same thing with the smartphones. There were smartphones before it. And they're the unsung pioneers because, yeah, they got the idea up. They even got on the market, but it just simply failed. Here's what we're doing here now. This is the picture phone.
Sure.
You know, it's two people talking using television.
Yeah.
And we're having a two-way conversation here. And the Bell Lab people, AT&T, they spent over $1 billion 1960s dollars developing a picture phone technology that died simply because the technological hurdles were way too great for them to overcome economically. I mean, you had to put a third phone line in. It cost $100 per month for prescription, and you had to pay for the calls. And you couldn't call anybody unless they had a picture phone.
Right.
And that's another big problem. But look what happened with this. This is the reason why we have these today. We didn't have to have a dedicated picture phone system, which was what everybody tried to do. I remember working for tech firms, doing contracts for them, going to meeting rooms and these teleconference devices sitting, gathering dust in the corner. No one ever used them because it was just too much of a bother. But here we are, and we have it because it just sort of like came with the new technology. The new technology became so powerful that it simply was folded into it, and it just became an afterthought. And now we're completely dependent upon the thing. And gosh, it's like so many. And you can point to other things, calculators. Remember calculators? Now.
Yeah, they used to not be an app on your phone, right? An actual piece of hardware.
It used to be an actual, honest-to-gosh piece of hardware, and now and I could point to so many other things. Cameras. Remember when people who weren't professional photographers had their own distinct cameras? Remember those things? Now they're on your phone. And they're a classic example of when someone actually destroyed their own business by being a pioneer. This was the Kodak people. They invented the digital camera.
Yeah. and then what happened to their film? Right. Yeah. Unfortunately, in B school, that's a pretty commonly read case study for that reason, right? And I would argue BlackBerry as a category creator kind of sealed their own fate with a similar path as well, right?
Exactly. And you see this happening. And oddly enough, it also explains why, businessmen aren't necessarily pernicious, evil creatures. I mean, AT&T invented the plastic recording tape back in the 90s. And they thought, if we put this on the market, we're going to go out of business because we work by selling telephone calls. But if people are able to leave messages, we're not going to be able to make any money. So we'll just put this to the side here.
Yeah. So there's a really interesting human thread you're weaving here that I want to unpack for a second. So as the technology and whatever it's photography or telecommunication or pick an area, as that technology advances, the human involved, there becomes this conversation then on what does it mean to be a competent X? What does it mean to be a competent photographer? What does it mean to be a competent, tablet user, right? Or calculator user, mathematician, right? And so what's fascinating about that is we're looking at not only this progression of technology and in some ways disparate technology that then gets brought together in a way that goes, hey, you know what? Now what it means to be in the line of work of doing podcasts, for example, it has evolved over time, right? Because of the technology that's made that possible. How do we, any thoughts on how we navigate the role of the human in that and what it means to be a competent, user?
That's a very good question. Look at, for example, what we're using to talk. We're talking over computers. I grew up at a time, I remember programming computers with punch cards.
Yeah.
Punch cards, whole stacks of them. And what was fascinating
Keep those in the right order too, right?
Oh, yeah. You want to see a man cry. Just watch if he knocks over a stack of punch cards.
Yeah, it's a bad day.
But the thing about it was very amazing. And I saw this with my own eyes as computers started to develop, which was that even the big geniuses who were developing these computers had no understanding of what they were. They literally did not understand them conceptually of what these machines were capable of. They thought they were just number crunchers. That's all they were. They processed numbers. They couldn't think, they have other ideas about what you might do with them. They could do accounts. They could run factories. You could call up your home and have it turn on your oven. Why you'd want to do that, I don't know, but.
Right.
It was all this. It was all this basically industrial number stuff. They didn't really understand what you could do with a computer, and the reason was really very, very simple. They couldn't play with the things.
Yeah.
They could
Yeah.
not play with. I mean, when you have got some huge mainframe computer that's literally a piece of architecture, it's built into the building, and and it costs a fortune to just get a few minutes of time on it. You can't play with the thing. Everything has to be very serious research.
Yeah. And when there's there's no playing going on, there's no imagination going on, right? There's
no imagination. Also the case where you simply cannot just fiddle with it. The hands-on fiddling. And then along came the personal computers, the hobby stuff. And I don't just mean things like the Apple II. I mean the real low-end stuff like the ZX81, which I had with the little membrane boards and a whole K of memory.
Yeah. I mean, how do you even use all that, right?
Well, yeah, who was ever going to use it? In fact, they were actually talking very serious. Who the heck is ever going to use 1 megabyte of memory? That's ridiculous. No one's ever going to use that.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. That's funny.
But the thing was, we could play with it. We could play around and say, okay, what can the computer do? You can't break it, theoretically, but you could play with it. You could see what this program could do. And in the early days, of course, if you couldn't program a computer, you couldn't use it. You had to be able to program it. And so we were all just learning about these things like kids, because we could just see what this could do. Let's change this a little bit. Let's do this. And you realize this is a number cruncher. This is an information processor. Literally any form of information. This was the big revolution with computers. Any form of information could be processed on a computer, and information covers everything.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah. Numbers, text, audio, video, still images, color, just all sorts of things that we realized, oh my God, these things. And once you realize that can happen, you start thinking about what can you do with something that just processes information. And we're still trying to figure that out. And with that, this is where we get back to what we were originally talking about, how this changes how we work with things. It incredibly improved how we're able to do things. The doom and gloom, everybody always said. I was just actually watching an old BBC program from 1961 talking about automation and the big fear that it was going to take jobs away from everybody. What they don't realize is that it doesn't mean we're all going to be sitting around doing nothing. It just means we're going to be a lot more productive, and that's what happened.
And we'll be doing something different, right?
We'll be doing something different, right? I mean, one aspect of this, for example, I do the work of 8 people now, without even thinking about it. If I was doing the job I was doing now 30 years ago, I would have staff.
Yeah.
I would have to have a secretary, a professional typist. I would have to have a photographer. I would have to have at least 2 research assistants. I would have to have, and of course, New Atlas would have to be, you need printing stuff. You need linotype. You would need people who could actually physically do all of the old-fashioned type of editing. You know, where you have to go you wouldn't have any kind of a device that could help you to proofread, for example, or check your spelling. It would be relentless. And the result is it would just be this enormous stuff to run a magazine like that. And the cost would be just astronomical. And at the same time, you wouldn't be able to do what you could do, because we today, not just at New Atlas, but just any kind of publication, we can respond instantly to things. Instantly.
An extraordinary throughput with that as well. You know, I mean, the breadth and depth of topics you're able to talk about.
Oh, good heavens, yes. I mean, and the development of AI, which in many ways I really hate, but in some ways I'm beginning to find is a very useful tool. If you treat it like a really stupid teenage intern, it's great.
Yeah. Yeah, you got to feed it well right now.
So so if you just treat it like, you know, some kid you're hiring for minimum wage, go look this up in the library for me. It takes a lot of donkey work out of whatever you're doing. And it's one of these things which can be a very powerful tool. So long as and that's the real key with a lot of this stuff, and what can help people to understand all this innovation. You have to think of them as tools.
Right.
If you don't think of them as tools, you're not understanding the game.
Well, and what's fascinating about the tool concept as well is that there's, you know, so you've got sort of this problem space, solution space, and the movement between the two. And you could have one pass where you go, hey, we have X problem, so we're going to take something from the problem space, and we're going to come up with a solution. And there's this problem solution kind of matchmaking that happens, right? And there's this other pass where you can go, hey, I'm going to create something. I'm going to go find a problem for it. And so that's sort of this backward pass that we can see going on. And what's fascinating about this circular loop we're talking about here, though, the playing with it, the evolution of that, is we see that in children so fascinatingly. You know, I have 2 kids myself. Maybe I'll get a microwave and it comes in a cardboard box, and I'll think, okay, the cardboard box was there to protect the microwave. Now the microwave's installed. Now the cardboard box is to be recycled. And in the eye of the imagination, no, the cardboard box is now a rocket ship. And actually, if it had windows on it, now it's a school bus, and now it's doing all these other things, right? And you see the pass go from problem space, microwave needs some sort of protection, into solution space. Here's a box to do that. But now that's gone from here's a box that now back into the problem space has solved the problem of how do these dolls go from the dollhouse over to the backyard, you know? And so now you bring that into the world of technology, and
you've just done the world of technology right there. That is technology.
Yes, exactly. Right. You're right. Even in the world of technology already there. And the necessity for the user to be part of this continuous innovation that goes on, you know, and the need to have, you know, solution space opportunities to then go feed problem space again, and kind of this iterative loop that we create.
Well, yes, absolutely. In fact, the history of technology is littered with this, where you find something where somebody goes, okay, there's a solution here, but we don't have a problem for it. I mean, have you ever heard of a raincoat called the Macintosh?
Okay. Yep.
Yeah. All right. It's an old-fashioned type of raincoat. Well, it was invented by a guy named Macintosh, who was looking at the waste products caused by using coal to make city gas. In other words, you would burn the coal, it would give off gases, and these gases could be used to, you know, light lamps and heat places and so forth. But it left off this nasty, tarry substance, part of which was something called naphtha. Okay. And what Macintosh realized was, okay, I could do something with this. What can I do with it? And then he realized I could just put this on a piece of cloth, just let it soak in, put another piece of cloth on top of it, let all that dry, and I could produce a waterproof fabric.
Wow, fascinating. Yeah.
And the same thing happened. Well, if you want a later one, which everybody is familiar with now, lasers. When the laser was first developed, they called it famously the solution in search of a problem. And for years, they were going, what do we do with this thing? It's incredible, but we have no idea what to do with lasers. And it wasn't until about 10 years later that real laser technologies started to come out. And before that, they were just these weird science fiction things. But it took a long time, and that was only because, and you could point that again and again and again, all the way through history, that these things would come up and people would go, you know, I mean, well, heck, I mean, go back to 2001, A Space Odyssey. You've got the ape man there with the bone. And you're like, I could do something with this bone, you know?
Yeah. The part that I find really interesting about that as well is there's a storytelling component too, of not only how something works or how, you know, how it can do the thing that it can do, but the why it matters, right? The why it matters, and sort of this meaningful narrative that accompanies that. On, you know, it's sort of like, hey, I could take the byproduct from coal and I could laminate between fabric, and now I've got a waterproof material. It's in the why that matters, of, you know, we're recycling waste, and we're developing a novel way to you know, create new types of garments, you know. So storytelling, and that's, I find it fascinating. Archaeology, then playwright, and the time through theater, you would think would be almost like the segue, but it highlights that
it's all part of the same. It's all part of the same thing. You have to understand, one of the things that I taught was history of science and technology. That was part of my teaching. And the history of technology is a big thing when it comes to archaeology. And it is fascinating to see how new technologies come in and how they radically change things. The development of the stirrup radically changed the whole world. The production of the mold bore plow opened up huge areas to cultivation, and it just goes on and on. And the wonderful thing about it is that it isn't a nice, simple progression. There was this what was a school of thought. I can't remember what it's supposed to be called, but the Whig theory of history, which is it's a progression along
Okay.
and it's linear. But history doesn't work that way. There are
Yeah.
all these extremely complex interactions, and we're talking about technology.
Mm-hmm.
Incredibly complex interactions, and you never know exactly how they're going to work. And you can just follow any sort of path and it'll go like this, or you go back to where you were and it will go like that.
Yeah.
Because you're seeing things which will affect this and will affect this and will affect this and will affect this. And it's just things like, what's one I could describe? Which would be, how did the Black Death produce the printing press?
Oh my. Okay. I'm interested.
Well, the Black Death, of course, wiped out a large number of, something like a third to a half of the people in Europe, depending on the numbers you have. Terrible, terrible death. But what happened was that it concentrated wealth. Because so many people died, the wealth trickled over to fewer people. People started to get, the people who were left were richer. Okay, I'm oversimplifying this tremendously, but they get richer, which means they could afford things they previously couldn't. And one of which was frilly cotton knickers. Women could wear cotton undergarments.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, they became very, very popular after the Black Death because people could afford them. Well, what do you do with your frilly cotton knickers when they get old? Well, what you do is, of course, what people have been doing ever since, the ape man we're talking about with the bone, you recycle it. And so you take it and because there was so much of it, what they did was they would take it, they would shred it, and then they would pulp it in water and reduce it to fabric, these little bits of fabric. And then they would put it on a wire screen in these flat sheets, and they would let it dry. They would press the loss of the water out, let it dry completely, and you have what we call paper.
Yep. There it is. Wow.
And since you have got lots of this now relatively cheap paper, you could have this new thing called the printing press, which previously would be useless because there's nothing to print it on, and you've got your printing press.
Yeah. It's fast. So the next time the kids outgrow, a set of clothes, hey, we're not going to, donate those or get rid of them. Let's pulp them down. Let's shred them. And then we'll feed the printer in the office then. Right. And
that's right. Yeah. That's
it.
If you still have a printer.
Exactly.
I was so annoyed. I had to do some business a couple of months ago, and the firm I had with was trapped somewhere about 1920, it seemed like, and they insisted about having hard copy documents. And I'm like, what the? I haven't used the printer in a year and a half.
Yeah, it is 2026, right? Oh, that's funny. So,
we have these things called
part,
PDFs.
Yeah, and look at that. They can be sent electronically. It's incredible.
Yeah.
The other fascinating thing about the origin story for the printing press is the illustration of the chaos imperative that goes into that as well. This opportunity for collision of disparate players, disparate technology, things that wouldn't have collided but then do. Well, and then how to basically see these things start to come together. So pulling that into today, you're seeing a lot of topics come through New Atlas. You're seeing a lot of topics just obviously through your own observation. I'm curious about trends, and trends that you made that you've seen that are interesting to you of either making and in particularly, obviously at Earhart, we're interested in aviation and aerospace primarily, and curious if you have anything in there. But what's catching your eye right now?
That's a very good question. One thing that has to be kept in mind when you're looking at trends is that people forget technology's plateau. In other words, they always assume that if the curve is going up, it will go up and up and up forever. It doesn't. You look at any technology, it will go like a rocket at first, and then it'll go like that because there's a plateau that's reached. And you have to bear that in mind when you're looking at trends. Aviation. The first 70 years of aviation were insane, incredible jumps. But nowadays, you have to struggle for every new advance because so many of the fundamentals have been invented. When the first real rockets were shot by the Germans in 1942, they were already working near the theoretical limit of the technology. And with chemical rockets, we really haven't gone that much further. We do it mainly by reducing the weight of the rocket and simplifying it. But the actual fundamental of the machine, we're stuck with what we've got until we do a whole new technology. And so you have to
Yeah.
keep these in mind. There's one reason why I'm very cautious when people talk about things like AI, because the one thing everybody thinks is going to go boom, and before you know it, it's going to be Skynet, and
Yeah.
and we're going
Yeah.
to be fighting off Terminators. And I'm
Yeah.
going, no, it's going to go like this, but it's going to go like that. There are all sorts of factors in AI which are going to start to limit what it can do. Simply the fact we use AI so much means we're feeding the result of AI back into the system, which AI is now learning from, and they're feeding what they've learned into what they're making and putting back into the system. And it's like you're feeding nothing back into it just becomes waste matter coming into it. And so the reason why I bring this up is in order to understand what the trend is, you have to understand the limitations and the cautions of it. Similar thing as we talk about with aviation, for example, there was a lot of excitement about electric propulsion. And believe me, it's great in many ways. I mean, if you look at electric motors, they've got tremendous advantages over internal combustion engines. And I've been seeing that my whole life. It's been quite incredible. Problem is the batteries. The batteries weigh like hell, and in an aircraft, they're dead weight because if you have a fuel tank, as you fly, the fuel tank gets lighter throughout
Exactly. It weighs less when it's empty, but not a battery.
the battery remains the same. And the other problem is batteries have very low energy density to them. And of course, the big thing is we talk about plateaus. Until we get fundamentally new technologies, these batteries are getting the same problem with the rockets. They're getting to that theoretical limit. And so you've got to take it into account. And so as a result I can see, for example, this is actually a very good thing. As you start to get towards the limits, you start to understand the technology better. And you get away from some of the more starry-eyed stuff. And you're like, okay, what can we really do with this stuff? Because now we've got to start working with the nuts and bolts of it. Where can electric propulsion, for example, really be used? No, we're not going to produce, all electric 737s.
Sure.
It's not going to happen. But on the other hand, I can think of a lot of very short range passenger jumps where they would be very, very good. I mean, there is an air route in Scotland, for example, in the Orkneys, I should say, where the flight time is 30 seconds.
Oh my gosh. So that's
perfect. It's leaping for, yeah, exactly. So, okay, there it will work. And the same thing is true with very small things like drones of various sizes and so forth. They work out great for these kind of things. So if you understand it, and we can start to go, okay, where do we see trends? Well, one thing, drones are going to become bigger and bigger part of our lives. I mean, if you look at the news, if you look at what's been going out of the situation in the Middle East and so forth, and in Ukraine and so on, drones have just become this huge part of it. And we're seeing them more and more a part of civil aviation now because there's much more about getting them to work with conventional aircraft. And so they've got to learn to play nice with one another. And that ties in also with the incredible advance in avionics. I mean, people don't appreciate, this is another big thing with aviation, is the part that AI is going to be playing with aircraft themselves. Remember that famous incident where that pilot saved all those people by crashing into I think it was the Potomac.
But yes, exactly.
Yeah. Sully, that's right. Yeah. Well, I was talking to a woman who is one of the biggest experts in aviation AI. And she said, if they had an AI system on that plane, there wouldn't have been any crash. The reason why there was is because Sully didn't have time to be able to properly assess the situation. He had to go by his instinct, which was right.
Sure.
But on the other hand, she said, well, we looked at the actual instance, and if an AI had been there, it would have said, okay, you can go to this airport. There's a strip there. You've got enough fuel there. You've got enough life left in your systems so you can get to here. And they could have touched down without incident.
Yeah.
And that's something we're going to see more of. And one part of this is, again, where we're talking about the limitation, how they help us to understand it, is we'll start to understand, okay, it's not going to take over. It's going to help. We will have pilot assist systems, which will become much, much more sophisticated, much more capable of helping pilots. And equally, not just to help them in emergencies, but to take the workload off of them.
Yep, exactly.
Which is extremely important. I mean, so when they're in stressful situations like takeoff and landing, they're not looking at 82 different directions. They can be dealing with the big problems of flying the plane, and the AI can handle all the little stuff that's going along here.
Exactly. Yeah.
And that's a huge thing you're seeing, particularly in military aviation. This is
Mhm.
one thing I've written about a lot, about how the pilot of the future, the sixth generation fighters, for example, is not going to be some dogfighter like you see in Star Wars. No, he's going to be a mission commander
Right. Exactly. Yeah.
who's not even going to be flying his own plane. Exactly. I mean,
Mhm.
the AI will deal that while he's dealing with go there, do this, do that,
Mhm.
and the other assets will only do it, but they'll figure out how to do it, and they'll coordinate with one another so they do it.
That's actually very, very much what we're doing at Earhart with bringing in this context aware, assisted dynamic. And one thing that I find really fascinating is the second order effect. If you look at the human involved in that, the Dutch Air Force actually was a part of a study a few years ago where they were looking at stick inputs, and short version of it is they were able to correlate the complexity and stress of the flight and actually see the corresponding cognitive load on the pilots changing
Mhm.
throughout the flight. And so it's exactly what you're describing of when you put the right technology in there and you put the right automation in there, which needs to be contextually aware. It's not, hey, here's some more information for you. Here's some more information for you. It's got to reduce workload, not present even more. But done right, what you end up with is not only a better outcome for that particular flight, but you end up with a pilot or an operator that, kind of like we were talking about earlier, their role in that evolves over time as well. What
Mhm.
it means to be a competent pilot 5 years from now is evolving, like what it meant to be a competent journalist 20 years ago has evolved now. It's a moving thing. But then the cognitive load and the burnout is lower, which we can then open up that bandwidth to do something else with the human in the loop, and it's
Absolutely.
fascinating.
Oh, absolutely. And as you've been talking about with this, that's one thing you brought up, and I think was very, very important, is the system being able to understand its pilot and
Mhm.
know when the pilot is getting stressed. And
Mhm.
okay, I'm going to shut my electronic mouth right now.
Right. Exactly. Exactly. Yep. Yeah. I've said it on a few different conversations at this point, and so for those that have been listening for a while, I hope I'm not sounding like a stuck record. But one of my dreams for future of aviation, and by future of aviation, I mean later this year, early next year. Like I
Mm,
want to see this happen is when our system, for example, is so aware of the pilot that he or she can be presented with something of, hey, you're about to come into land, but you're stressed. Take a breather, right? Walk
mhm,
through this for a second. You gotta be prepared for what's coming up. And that would
mhm.
demonstrate the most incredible awareness, not only in the phase of flight and what's going on, but awareness in what is that doing to the person operating the aircraft.
Well,
And you know,
exactly. I'm reading some of the material that you sent me, and it sounds very much like you're trying to do Henry Ford's old idea of the flying flivver. I mean, that was in the early days of aviation, that was a big thing. In other words, do for the airplane what Henry Ford did with the Model T, utterly
interesting.
democratize it. The problem with it is that ask any pilot and they'll tell you that's crazy. This is why the flying car never took off, because it's an
Yeah.
aeroplane.
Right, right. Yeah.
If some idiot on the motorway decides he's going to take off, he's going to kill somebody.
Right,
You know?
right. Yeah. Yeah, sometimes the collision of worlds is still a clash of worlds, Sometimes it's,
Exactly.
yeah,
And so the result is that's why you don't have it, because it's a really specialized thing. And so the problem is not the physical technology of creating a flying car. Well, it's kind of back to contradictions in terms of some ways. But let's just say a democratized aircraft is probably a better way to put it. You can't deal with the technology, you've got to deal with the avionics, the control systems, and so forth. They've got to be as forgiving as possible. I mean, this is one thing. The analogy with the motor car is a good example of this. People used to make all these jokes about women drivers, right? About how terrible women drivers, were. And it wasn't just because of some misogynistic attitudes. It's because early motor cars were really hard to drive. They required huge amounts of
yeah,
physical strength to work them. And I've actually driven some of these old cars. Just working the brake and the accelerator was excruciating.
yeah,
You had
yeah,
to put this
and
pedal and you had to
counterintuitive,
push
right?
it down and you had to hold it. just starting
Yeah,
the thing, you
we
had this
lot to
crank,
learn.
and you had to be able, you had to be able to turn the crank and then let go of it before it broke your wrist. So of course women weren't very good drivers. They just couldn't get the damn wheel to turn. You know,
Yeah.
so it was only later when we
Yeah.
got hydraulic control systems and electronic ignition and so forth that everything was equalized. And we're seeing it more too with all these assisted driving systems. And the interesting thing about it is if you talk to road designers, for example, they actually design the roads because they know people aren't very good drivers. They say roads could be much narrower, for example, and cars could drive much closer together. But because people aren't very good drivers, they have got to build into the roads these big margins of error so that you don't have to worry about somebody sliding out of a lane and hitting the car in the other lane. You've got to have these wide shoulders and everything else so that there's lots of room for them to make mistakes.
Yeah.
But the same thing
Yeah.
with what you're doing is you're going to have to come up with things that will deal with the average person, not the exceptional person, which is how aircraft operate today.
Right.
So
Yeah.
it's a
Yeah.
whole
And
different
it's
problem.
the road analogy is fascinating too, because one conversation we hear often is, hey, if we really can lower the barrier to entry to aviation, which that is our aim, right? At Earhart, we're trying to make aviation not only safer but more accessible. And there's a storytelling narrative that goes into that. There's this opening up of opportunity that comes with that. And of course, then the second order, first order effect, really, second order effect is that then obviously more aircraft in the air means there's more aircraft in the air. There's a congestion dynamic to that. And exactly to your point, when you introduce more into a closed system by itself, it can create a drain on the throughput. But when you do so in a way that reduces chaos and introduces more logical decision making and automation, you can then tighten it in, right? And so in some ways, by introducing aviation to more people through the right application of automation and assisted capability, you're introducing a new way of aircraft to operate in this closed system that actually allows that system to support more aircraft. And it has to be
Well,
both.
the other thing you have to do, of course, remember, is the knock-on effect that's going to come with it. You have more aircraft. You have to get away from the way in which aviation is organized today with the use of hub airports
Yes,
and so
exactly.
forth. It's going to mean not just regional, but much more local airports. You're going to have what today are just basically little airstrips, which are going to have to handle some pretty sophisticated stuff. And that means you're going to have not just air traffic control systems. You need automated air traffic control systems, ones where you can have 5, 10 airports being handled by one person overseeing all of them. And it has to be that. You have got to have much more decentralized control of a lot of these things. You have to have what are practically, literal, not air taxis in the sense what they be talking about with a lot of the hype, but real air taxis, which move you from here to here, in other words, not just okay, here's how we're going to go way over here. We also have all this other stuff that feeds into it. Because if you get to your little airport and you can't get out of that little airport.
And there's this decentralization that is so exciting with that too. Is we've been seeing in the news recently. Thankfully, now with funding opening back up for TSA, we're hopefully going to see the long wait lines and all that kind of thing start to alleviate a little bit. But you see these choke points, and you bring up hub. A hub is exactly one of those choke points of when you're trying to optimize an air transport company and the network of routes that you're going to fly, and you're trying to get a lot of people onto a very efficient, very large plane to go from one centralized point to another. But by stripping away the necessity for that and opening up this more point to point, you can take the burden on the airspace at large, and you can distribute that out so much more. Instead of putting all the load on one centralized point to a point of failure, you can evenly distribute the load a lot better. Which
the other thing it does is it
one.
will bring back something we haven't had in the aviation industry for a long time, which is real competition. I mean, we see all these. You see all these airlines that go into these airports that we have today. You don't realize that the airlines are the ones who pay for the upkeep of the airport, which means that you have got maybe one airline which will utterly dominate that airport hub. The result is there's no real competition. And when you have competition, you have better services, you'll have better pricing, and general overall service will improve. Even if it's just little things like, you know, for short range movement and a lot more independent stuff, then you're going to start to see real. You may.
No.
It was excruciating in the fly on back in the 60s, when they were
Yeah.
nice. And I think in part, well, there are lots of reasons. I'm boiling it down pretty badly, but part of the reason is that when you've got just one player in the game, there's nothing that gives them any inducement. But if you have loads and loads of little players, and the other thing is, this is something we talked about with innovation. When you've got little players, you get way more innovation, way more innovation. Because it's always the little guys who have got, when you get companies getting big enough, industries getting big enough, they go for stability, not innovation. But if you have got lots of little guys all fighting, they're all going to be looking for innovation. And people forget that Apple and Microsoft were tiny companies, tiny companies at one point.
Yeah.
That were just that were just fly by night things. And they wondered how the heck they were going to survive. That can be pointed out again and again and again with the history of things. Even with aviation companies. In Seattle, you can go to the original Boeing headquarters, which is a little red wood shack. So, and if we get more back to that, I think we'll see a lot more innovation.
Yeah, and because it's this tight iteration loop, it's this opportunity to this, build and then measure and then learn from that and do that very rapidly and very iteratively, and it kind of goes back to that, that problem space, solution space, back into problem space, opportunity,
right.
and the more we can tighten that, and that's something that we're trying to push every day. For anyone wanting to see it, we are going to Oshkosh, and we're excited to bring it there too. And it's exciting seeing the right necessary technology coming together, and I do think there's an incredible opportunity in the aviation world that we're going to be seeing here soon, and certainly a place for storytelling and how we correctly communicate what it is that this is opening up in the world, and part of that first mover disadvantage is the imperative for that education, but yeah, it all comes full circle again, doesn't it?
Oh yeah. Oh, it's an exciting time. It's well worth to be looking at this. I'm going to the Farnborough Air Show this summer, which we will be covering on New Atlas.
There we go. Well, let's check it out.
Your go-to point for technology and science news. There's going to be some wonderful stuff there. And it's going to be really exciting to see what people are
Excellent.
doing.
When is that air show? I don't think I know the date for that one.
It's July 20th to the 24th.
Okay, perfect.
And it's if you don't know it, it is the big air show. This is where you're not just seeing, vintage stunt planes showing up. These are Lockheed Martin and Boeing and BAE Systems. And they are just measuring out billion-dollar deals on the floor.
Oh my gosh!
It's one of these. It is the big one.
That's incredible. And between Sun and Fun and then Oshkosh and then Farnborough, this is an incredible few months coming up for aviation then.
Oh yeah. Well, this is the thing that I'm looking forward to. This is when we start getting into the air show season. This is where we start seeing all the exhibitions showing up. Everything from the fun little fly-in, camp-in sort of stuff to the great big, power hitters kind of stuff. And it's always wonderful to see these kind of things.
Yeah, absolutely. And we're excited to be a part of it in our way as well. Well, David, thank you so much for being on the show and for sharing your perspective and helping us pull a thread from really just the breadth of journey that innovation goes through. And really appreciate your insights today.
I'm very happy to have been here, and I'm also happy to say that my corgi here has been a good little girl for the past hour.
There we go. Perfect. Hey, enjoying the podcast, I hope.
Well, I hope so too. Every now and again, she'll be going, "Oh, you're talking to someone?"
That's funny. Maybe a future aviator there then.
Yeah, maybe then.
Awesome. Well, thank you very much. Again, appreciate you having on the show.
No, that's all. It's a pleasure to talk to you. And remember, New Atlas.
New Atlas. Exactly.